everyone. Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful for us all to be together in this room today, to see some familiar faces, some faces I've only seen on a screen up until now, and some new faces too. Welcome. I'm Thandi Rose, one of the founding members of Coherent Healthcare, and I can't begin to express how inspirational it has been to experience the growth and evolution of our company. We are now working with more than 50 clinics globally, supporting over 100,000 patients. It has been incredibly rewarding to witness the impact of tech and AI-assisted patient management for clinic growth and capacity. For example, some of the clinics that we're working with are finding that they're able to thrive on a much smaller, tighter team, and some have also been able to realize their vision of expanding to multiple clinic locations. Up until now, the tech and commercial growth healthcare landscape has been a bit of uncharted territory. And that is why it is so incredibly critical to be having the open discussions that we'll be having today, building the connections that we'll be having today, and sharing knowledge amongst each other, like we are doing today. So on that note, I would like to introduce Jared to the podium.
Hi everybody. I think I know most of you, so thank you for coming. And oh, hey Dave. I didn't see you before. I think also Sean, who all of you have heard of or interacted with, either as Sean or anyone on Sean's team, who's just there with the camera. All of this was possible because of Sean and because of Meg. Hey Meg. So thank you so much. It's very exciting. I think usually when I've gone to these events, it's usually someone trying to sell something, which we will do in a little bit. But it's also exciting because there is a huge mix of people here. We have respiratory physicians and orthodontists and private equity buyers and platforms that are helping clinics sell. We also have patient advocates, which is an episode coming soon on Business of a Clinic from today, which is a very exciting story. And it's very exciting to have all those people together, because I think in our work, we work across clinical specialties, but I think oftentimes in your work, maybe less so. And we hear and see all kinds of interesting things. I was speaking earlier with Yogita, who runs a multi-site aesthetics clinic, and we're saying some of the things we see in MSK are hugely relevant in aesthetics, and similarly some of the things in aesthetics, like retention after the first visit, are really...
Could you speak in front of the mic, please?
Is that okay, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of crossover, which is very exciting. Sean, is that okay? Yeah, you're happy now. Great. So it's great. It's great for you to be here. Thank you so much. I think to give you a quick sense of what to expect, we've done the introductions, the meeting each other. We got the seating almost exactly right, which is awesome. And we'll do a quick hello from us. We'll then go into our first panel. That's going to be all around building a clinic worth buying, very focused on operations, patient obsession, customer obsession, the messy parts of creating something that is ultimately of value for someone else up the chain. And then afterwards, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll invite a second panel. And that second panel will talk about creating value at exit and thinking more about the transaction moment as well. So we will try and be done by 9. If it runs slightly over, it won't be by too much, but we'll try and keep it in time. And then for those who want to hang around afterwards, please do. This is me, apparently. I've never worn those clothes before, so it's very strange to see myself that way. We are trying to bring together people who believe in what we call the business of a clinic. The business of a clinic is the non-clinical parts of supporting patients. And oftentimes we find that those parts are under-nurtured, under-attended, and also very, very complex, not because they are hard, but because they are extraordinarily technically detailed, and we'll talk more about that later, but it is not often just a people problem, it's a people and a technology problem, or it's a people and a technology and a process problem. When you stick all those things together, it's suddenly not a press button and buy thing. You have to go quite deep. And so the opportunity to do that with our clinic partners is really wonderful. And that is very much what we talk about on Business of a Clinic. Before we start, just some ground rules. Information, feel free to use the ideas freely, quote as you see fit, but please maintain anonymity and affiliation. So please don't say that Jared said this or that John said that, unless it was really insightful, in which case I would love to be tagged and noted accordingly. But please do try and sort of maintain that confidentiality in the room, otherwise this doesn't really work, particularly for the panelists who I think will share very openly what they're working with, and hard to do that if there's sort of recording running in the background. So thank you for being here. When I was running clinic, a mentor said this to me, and I have maintained this as a sort of way of engaging with clinic owners today, is that running high growth provider operations is like doing a jigsaw where the pieces aren't constantly moving around and very urgent. And we especially thank people who came to this and have no idea what we do. And that's always interesting. There are some new faces here, and we appreciate your attending. So to those who don't know, we are very focused on this idea of patient leakage, the idea that people just sort of drop off and disappear and fade into the mist. We often use the image of a house with pipes that are leaking all over the place. You might see this with your new inquiries. You might see this with your long-standing patients. Oftentimes people will walk into the clinic in the morning and they'll say, hold on, I haven't seen Dev in 6 years. I wonder what happened. Or then they'll send an email, hey Dev, how are you? And then Dev suddenly remembers, yes, I need to do dental hygiene. Bam, right there, there's the moment. And that is leakage, this idea that patients just sort of drift. And oftentimes when we see clinics try to address the problem of leakage, it sort of looks like this. This is often what we see is extra front of house hires, more tech, things thrown together, tools, Google Sheets, stitched together at the edges, the hero receptionist who carries the whole show but then goes on holiday and everything falls down. And so this is sort of the often state of play, and what we try to do is to bring harmony to that engaged support book and payment process. And so this was supposed to be a picture of me with green glasses. It's neither me nor with green glasses, but you get the idea. So before we start panel one, we're going to do a little pipe check. You're welcome to participate. For those who have access to Wi-Fi or service, you can actually scan that. And we'll just ask you to provide a few answers to some questions. And actually, Sean, I should ask you, what is the, Great. So you can go ahead and actually just take a minute. If you need Wi-Fi, there's a card. I think that's 11 Cavendish and then brick red is the password? Brick red is the password, all lowercase. So you can just take a minute. For those who don't run clinics, this is not something that will be immediately relevant for you, so you can probably breeze on past it, but you can try and stick with it. It's only a few questions, and we'll give you a minute to do so. Cool, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Can I just ask Sean, do you want me to sit? Is that better? Have to speak in the microphone. Great. Fantastic. Great. So panel one, we do have three folks joining us for panel one. We'll start with two, and then we'll add the third when she arrives. We're going to dig into this idea of building a clinic worth buying. We'll call it operations. We have three people joining us. We have Andrea, we have Simon, and we have soon to arrive Joëlle, I hope. And I think maybe just to start, do you mind just doing quick introductions, sort of background and what you're doing and building now, and then we can sort of dig into it from there. Please.
Sure, these on. Yeah, okay. Simon Devane, Chief Executive, Pure Sports Medicine. I have been in healthcare for 19 years. Prior to that, I worked in a number of different sectors. I have a commercial and operational background. I came to the UK from New Zealand in 2002 to play rugby, travel and work in the city. Subsequently, I met my wife from Glasgow, got coerced into joining a startup, a healthcare startup, and I'm still here and I'm loving it. So my journey with Pure has been quite interesting. I joined as a COO, so spent the first 6.5 years building the business. You don't know that you need a chief financial officer day one, but eventually you will do if you do the right things. and then moved into managing director for 18 months as we transitioned the founder and chief executive out of the business, and then took over as chief executive in January 2015. So we are specialists in sport and musculoskeletal medicine. We have 10 clinics, 8 in London, 1 in Milton Keynes, 1 in Edinburgh. And I'm delighted to be here and to join today's panel discussion.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Andrea, I am a former management consultant. I was at BCG for many years with a friend of mine, Enrico, who's going to be on the next panel. We decided to consolidate the aesthetic space in the UK. So we started last year. We bought 5 clinics in the last 1 month with a big plan to grow the organization. Yeah, here we are.
Great. So I guess maybe, Simon, just to start with you. So you've been in healthcare 19 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
So
That's why I've got grey hair and less hair.
Exactly. So I think maybe just to start, it would be really helpful if you could do a sort of a time gap,
Yeah.
19 years ago today, through the lens of clinic ops, building something that scales, building something that grows, building something of value. What has changed,
Yeah.
and maybe also what hasn't changed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, day one was a bit of a shock because I'd left a role with British Telecom where I was a consultant, and I joined Pure Sports Medicine at our Kensington clinic, and I had a cardboard box for a desk and a laptop, and it was very basic. We had 3 beds downstairs with a curtain in between them. We had 2 rooms upstairs. So aesthetically, it wasn't great, but we had excellent clinicians, and we had a very strong vision about what we wanted to do. We were deliberately set up from day one to separate the business and clinical medical components. So there was a team of people, which I was involved in, that was focused on growing the business and building it, and the clinicians, lead clinicians involved with clinical quality, oversight, governance, etc. So I guess one of the things that meant that we were starting with a growth mindset. So we were starting from day one to build to a business that had significant scale at some point in the future. So we weren't pivoting partway through the journey. And I think in some ways that is obviously beneficial, but it is challenging because you are trying to think far enough ahead to make decisions today that influence the future. Obviously, in 2007, AI wasn't a thing, and now it is. So these things change very quickly sometimes. Certainly what hasn't changed terribly much is, particularly with our space in healthcare, is that doing the right things by the patient, focusing on getting the best patient outcome, delivering the best experience you can, that hasn't changed. Lots of things have, though. I would say systems. Back then we were struggling to find solutions for problems, and it's not until fairly recently, I would say the last 5 years, things have accelerated. So 5 years ago, if Jared and I were talking, I'd be saying technology is not where we need it to be. Now technology has gone so far and so quickly, so we are struggling to catch up with what's possible. But technology is part of the solution, but it's all about people. So clearly over a period of 19 years, what does change is the demographics that you're working with, both from a patient and staff perspective. So understanding and reflecting on what those individual needs are is really important. So younger workforce value different things to the older workforce. The same, I'd say the way that you communicate with patients is different depending on the demographics. So you've got to take all of that on board. Operationally, I think remaining agile is key, and trying to build in regular, reflective, critical, analytical processes to just check that things are still working. Because once you solve a problem, it's quite easy to forget about it and plough on to the next challenge and the next hurdle. But things change. And what you set up 5 years ago may no longer be fit for business today. And so you've got to have those little triggers in place to allow you to change things before they become a problem that you've got to go and firefight and solve. So Operationally, it still comes down to people supported by good systems, clearly, but people are still at the heart of it, and it hasn't changed.
Can I add one thing? So I cannot comment on 19 years ago, obviously it wouldn't be. But since I started in the aesthetic industry, I think I completely agree on everything you said. And when I started aesthetic as a consultant 6 years ago, we were doing surveys to consumers. The first thing that consumers said was the source. How did you get a clinic, etc.? It was all word of mouth. It's because my mom told me that. It's because my friend. It's because of the doctor recommendation. I think, and I've seen a survey that BCG did recently, and one of the first sources is digital. Like, people just go online. You need to really have your digital capabilities, both on social media, both on SEO, both on your website. Having Jared making recalls with all these crazy analytics that you have. But if you don't do that, I think you're going to be light compared to where you were 5 years. So like, I think aesthetic, I don't know if it's your industry that way, but aesthetic in the last 5 years changed dramatically.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a photo of the first tweet that was sent from our business, and obviously, you know, social media wasn't a thing back in 2007. And to your point, I mean, you used the word consumer. I totally agree. I would have offended nearly all of our clinical staff in 2007 if I used the word consumer in the same sentence as patient. Now, we are consumer healthcare. So yeah, I mean, it has changed. I mean, it's a long time, but things have changed a lot.
And the clinicians are still offended by the word consumer.
Well, we're working on that. Not so much. I don't know. I think it's how you position it. I just, because I'm non-clinical, I come at it through a consumer lens myself, and I guess my very simplistic view is that they are consumers. They have choices. And they become patients when they come in to see you, but until that point, they're a consumer.
Just want to pause for a minute. Hey, Joëlle.
Hi. Sorry. She's getting here. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Joëlle, we've just gotten started.
Okay, perfect.
You just missed intro, so do you want to just quickly introduce yourself with the business you're building, and then we'll crack on?
Yeah. How extensive?
Like, they each did about 60 seconds.
Okay, fine. Okay, so I'm Joëlle. I'm the founder of Injectual. So Injectual is an aesthetic clinic chain. So we've got 2 locations now. One in Notting Hill, one in Shoreditch, and we're about to launch our 3rd one as well. We highly specialize in gender affirming care, also because I'm trans myself, and I'm also building sort of like a separate clinic solely focused on gender affirming care, where you can go for your full medical transition. So that's me.
Thanks very much.
Sorry, excuse me, Joëlle, if you could speak.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You don't have to do it again. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I think jumping on a trend just now, this idea of consumer, there's arguably a difference between being patient obsessed and being customer obsessed. There's probably an overlap in that Venn diagram as well, but there might be different things that you think about when you prioritize serving the customer as a counterpoint to prioritize serving the patient. If I can nudge the conversation toward how do you prioritize the customer without making sacrifices to the patient care, how do you prioritize the customer expectation? What does customer as opposed to patient obsession look like in your clinics? And just, Joëlle, if you're happy to maybe kick off,
Yeah,
that'd be
of
great.
course. I mean, obviously, look, I'm not a medic myself, so I look at everything from the lens of obviously a customer. So I think it's always like a bit of a struggle between me and my sister. So I started a business together with my sister, who's a plastic surgeon. So she's always the medical side, and I guess the patient's focused side. And I'm always like thinking from a consumer and from a customer point of view, like, I want to give the best experience. Like, I'm obviously, look, safety always comes first, but I'm always like, you know, how do we make this a really nice experience? Because, like, obviously, if we leave it up to medics, no offense, it would look like an NHS waiting room. You know what I mean? Like, oh, sorry. So yeah, but I think it's obviously good in my business that we've got sort of like, you know, the fluffy side and then obviously the medical side, and we sort of like always try to meet in the middle. But I think, you know, the customer, I think, you know, the industry is evolving, you know, where it used to be fine to have that clinical NHS waiting room, no offense, sorry. It's nowadays, you know, patients want to have the full experience, you know, and they want the convenience, and they want to, you know, the thinking about the aftercare and like, you know, not just being ushered out on the street, you know, you know, think about the full experience. So yeah, that's me.
I couldn't agree more. I never used the NHS waiting room. I'm gonna reuse it because I love it. I think it's the tremendous change that the aesthetic industry had in the last 5 years. I think if we're thinking about 5 years ago, it was way more doctor environment. It's still run by doctor, nurses, etc. But I think the importance of the environment you're in, that kind of luxury style, etc. I think it's going to be made a difference on who's going to win, who will going to lose in this market.
Simon, three beds and a curtain.
Yeah.
How has that changed? Is the customer experience true in MSK territory? Do you see the same thing happening?
Yeah, well, I guess I think the funding model comes into play here a bit because generally musculoskeletal care is very reactive. You know, everyone knows that prevention is better than the cure. But given the fact that private medical insurance won't fund the cure, it'll fund the fixing the problem. When we're talking about how we approach consumers, it's about that customization, that tailored healthcare. It's about talking to people about things that are relevant to them. So, you know what it's like. You have you have brands that you engage with. Why? Because they talk to you directly about things that are important to you. And healthcare is no different, really. So what we need to do is have systems that allow us to segment our population, our patient population, so that we understand what they need and what they're interested in, and then use that information in a targeted fashion with our marketing to create content, to go after a specific demographic of the consumer market, to talk to them and engage with them in things that we know resonate. You know, if you've got someone that's interested in running, there's no point sending them a whole lot of information on something that's not running related to necessarily. So, yeah, I mean, but you have to invest in systems to help you do that. So, you know, when you're small, when we were, as I said, you know, three rooms in Kensington, we worked hard as, you know, a lot of face-to-face contacts, a lot of CPD, a lot of education. But as you get bigger, clearly that's not efficient. So you've got to find, and again, technology's moved a long way. So very focused on trying to understand our patient population in a lot of detail so that we can target our comms to consumers.
I think it's interesting, and maybe Joëlle, this is best place for you. One of the things that stood out in the conversations we've had before is the intimacy and understanding that you have of your particular customer audience, the depth, the empathy that you hold. How does that show up in your practice for patients?
Do you mean like gender affirming care specific?
For example.
I mean, obviously, look, it definitely helps my own personal experience with it. You know, I went through everything myself. First and foremost, not just for gender affirming care, but also like I'm an avid Botox user. Like I love it, so I've tried it all. But especially, I guess, with gender affirming care, you know, there are nuances, but that's, I guess, for every sort of like niche of clientele that you only sort of like find out while, you know, going through the journey yourself, or actually like actively speaking or having a family member. But you know, there's small things like, you know, intake forms, the way you're greeted, being able to choose to have your numbing cream on in a separate waiting area. You know, there's like several nuances that you just, you know, that are very, very small and make such a big difference, I think. But yeah, sorry, did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, no, it's really helpful.
Okay.
And maybe a good segue into some of the details you talked about, intake forms as an example,
Yes.
Different areas of the clinic used for different parts of the journey.
Yeah.
These are, you know, most clinics are ultimately assets in the sense that there's a space and you need to move people through that space, and the more people that you move through without compromising the experience, usually that shows up at the end of the month.
Of course, when it's obviously like, look, all of these things are very nice, but it's especially how your clients are treated by the staff, and there's a difference. Like I always say that to my practitioners, as long as your intention is right, don't be afraid to say the wrong things as well. You know what I mean? Everybody gets it wrong. Correct yourself and move on. Like it's not that big of a deal. But I think you can definitely sense when somebody like means well. And that sounds like such a fluffy thing, but I think it's really important. And also like that's why I spend a really long time vetting the right kind of people, to work for the business, because one bad apple can ruin your entire reputation. At the end of the day. So yeah.
Andrea, 0 to 5 clinics, 12 months. So you've...
I buy them, I don't open them.
You buy them, don't open them. That's a good point. Yes. Joëlle just touched on team and the importance of team. And so it would be really interesting to understand a bit more about your experience effectively inheriting 5 teams or soon to be 5 teams, all of them with their own DNA, their own beliefs about what good looks like, their own expectations about what comes. How has that been for you? What does the journey look like in terms of trying to get 5 appendages to behave like one body?
Yeah, so this probably has been the most challenging part. First of all, we're not trying to make them behave as one body. So our model is we are buying clinics, we have a brand which is Skingevity on top, but we leave the brand, we leave the teams, we leave their behavior, their dynamic, the nuances on how they treat patients and all of that will stay with the clinic. We're not going to demand process, etc. We're not standardizing everything. That's, I think, is the easiest part of the job. I think we are very picky when we do due diligence, when we buy an asset. We really need to like the practitioner. We meet the team, the whole team, before signing the deal. We're not going to gonna do a deal without meeting the people, really get to know them, because if we don't believe they're going to be a good fit with what we're trying to build, then we're not going to buy it, because it's not what we want. That said, I completely agree with one point that was said before. One bad person in the team can destroy completely the team, and we had those kind of situations. So it's a matter of trying to. The most difficult part of all this balance, all this ecosystem, is to maintain the balance within the team and to maintain the culture up. That's what makes a business successful.
So can I push that a little bit deeper? Simon, you were talking earlier about tech, but also that it's still about people. And I guess, Andrea, you're saying it's about people, and Joëlle, you're saying it's all about the people, and yet we keep hearing it's all about the AI. So what exactly, so Andrea, I guess following that statement, obviously there's a focus on efficiency. When you say maintaining, enabling that team, what does it actually look like in practice on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis? How does that show up in your 9 to 5, or more likely 7 to 11?
Mine?
Yeah.
7 to
AM to PM.
So you touched upon a lot of things. So AI, I think, is a great tool. Tools, tech is great. You need to have that to run a practice that works, and etc. But at the end of the day, if you don't have people happy in the practice, that they come to work because they're happy with what they're doing, they're going to transmit that to patient. The patient's not going to come back, even if you're calling them back with emails, messages, phone calls, etc. So I think that's the most important point. The AI and the tech can enable the journey, can bring people through the door, but at the end of the day, for me, for our team, like the magic happens once they're inside. So that's a key point of success, I think.
Simon, I'm curious, 10 sites now? 11, 12, 13?
Yeah, 10, and one acquisition in that.
Everything else is greenfield?
Everything else is greenfield.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So we have a different approach to acquisition in that we have built a brand that has a lot of equity in it. So it's really important that when we looked at this acquisition, that we were going to change the name on the door, we were going to change the systems, we were going to standardize things for obvious reasons. And bearing in mind, I think this is probably starting from a very low bar. This clinic had 6 rooms. Had been in practice for north of 25 years. 1 computer. This is 2 years ago. 1 computer on reception running Windows 7. Paper notes, stored in filing cabinets. So day one we turn up with 6 brand new Dell PCs and actually the systems that was the easy stuff. Changing the name on the door, putting in the systems, training, that was easy. The most difficult piece was the cultural transition. So here's a business that had been run as very much a lifestyle, so people could take leave whenever they wanted, and all of a sudden we had a bit of structure. Well, a lot more structure than they were used to anyway. And that created challenges. So, you know, nature of employment law, you've got to troop your employees across. You take what you get as part of the acquisition, and then you work through that change process. And, you know, we probably ended up losing 50% of the staff in the first 6 months. We were okay with that, actually. And the other 50% were the ones that we wanted to keep and built a team around them. So 100% agree, all about people. And the point about the bad apple, again, our clinics are quite large, so we can have 30 to 40 clinicians in one practice. And even at that scale, one person can rock the apple cart pretty quickly. So you need to have a strong culture. And again, one of the challenges with multi-site is that when you're at one site, you can influence things quite easily. When you have multiple sites, it becomes more challenging. So you need a strong culture, you need good management and leadership around you to help be purveyors of that culture. So there's no easy answer or magic bullet. It takes time. But you've got to be very clear about what you want your business to be, how you want people to interact with each other, with patients, and have that bedrock, that foundation that basically is your the morals and values for how you operate.
I think I know there are a lot of clinic owners that are probably smaller scale than all three of you here. And I think everybody has that one person when you're running one clinic. If you're running 10 sites, maybe you've got those 3 people who, if they don't show up to work the next day, you are terrified because they know where everything is. I think it would be interesting to understand, without giving away the secrets, I appreciate everyone has their own secrets, when you are making those key non-clinical hires, the operational body work, customer facing, people who are not in the treatment room. Certainly what I found running clinic was that is not necessarily a part of the clinic where you have a lot of bench, particularly on the front line. You often find yourself working with people who are on an upswing in their career, who maybe don't have as much experience. Maybe it gets a bit bigger if you move into corporate at 10 sites, but for the most part, when you're growing practices on a clinic-by-clinic basis, that operational backbone can be challenging to build. Once it takes hold, it usually sticks, but it's hard to build. So I think it'd be really interesting to understand, maybe Joëlle, starting with you, when you think about your operational team that's enabling you to do the work that you want to do, how are you hiring those people? What are you looking for? What are you saying no way to? What are your red lines? I know your operations manager, director, who's great. But it wasn't always the case, right? So how did that journey look?
I mean, I hired on vibes, not gonna lie, good vibes. No, I mean, obviously she also came, look, I think first and foremost, recommendations from other people, I feel like has always proven to be the most, valuable asset of like hiring people. If somebody has had a good experience with somebody, that's always like a really good green flag for me. And yeah, then obviously, like I said, if you want to be close with someone, you gotta get along. So it sounds really stupid, but I literally hire a bit on vibes as well, And sometimes you get it wrong, but if you have got some sort of like human intelligence, of like emotional intelligence, of like getting people, plus then there's a good recommendation for somebody else. I mean, that's great. But yeah, it's trial and error as well, right? So I think now I'm fairly new at this as well as being a founder, and it's only now that I'm starting to really get a grasp on like the hiring process and like what I can quite easily now see, okay, this is gonna be good, this is gonna be bad in the first, I guess, couple of days. So yeah, it's hiring on vibes. Sorry.
Hiring on vibes. That was hiring on vibes.
Wow.
Great. No, it's but your team DNA is really stitched together.
Yeah.
So it works,
You know,
right?
I don't know if that's the right way to be, but also I think as a founder, I think a big part of my job is obviously, and I do that with, I've learned to really enjoy that as well. It's just like trying to keep morale high, taking some employees for a lunch and like, you know what I mean, trying to also like get them to know them, not too personal, but you know what I mean, like to some sort of extent, like that you can also have fun at work, because like, I think when the moment somebody enjoys going to work, they'll also deliver their best work. And then obviously look a bit operationally, you just need somebody that's like really good at, structural, and like also saying no and like putting structures in place, and like, it's like so important. Because I'm like the most type B person ever, so I'm like, we need somebody like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Simon, Andrea. How do you think about building your management team? I think again, it probably looks different at different sizes and stages.
Yeah, I was just reflecting then, just thinking about the journey that I've been through personally. I would say when you were smaller, by the very nature of that smaller business, you are doing lots of things probably. You are a good generalist. And so it's obviously easy when you're a generalist to understand different facets of the business. And so you have some idea about the technical competencies that you're hiring for. But still, I think what underpins that absolutely is team and cultural fit. I played team sport my whole life, so that comes very naturally to me. But I would say all of the hires that I've made have been either with some understanding of the technical capability, but the final decision is down to team and cultural fit.
Can I call that vibes?
Yeah. It's a different thing. But equally, you get stuff wrong. And I would also say that I've got loads of hires wrong. And one of the things that you've got to realise, because I think when you hire someone, you take it on personally that you want it to work, because that's your call. The reality is it doesn't always work. And having the confidence, having the process of a 3-month probationary period and structures in place to review performance in the first 3 months, and then the confidence to say, no, this is not working and draw a line under it is critical. And that is hard. When you are small and it's very intimate and you have connected personal relationships, because you're engaging people to do stuff that they probably wouldn't do in a bigger business in the early days, that is hard. And but I would say that for me is as a point of reflection anyway. When I think back, there were lots of hires that we didn't get right. If I knew what I knew now, would they have stayed in the business long for less time? Absolutely. We would have called it in 3 months.
Andrea?
I mean, they said a lot, and I agree with everything they said. I think for us, it's been 12 months now. I think finding talents to put at corporate level has been more challenging than finding clinics to buy. And hiring, I think, has been the biggest headache. I think now we have a good team. We made mistakes. I think one thing that we learn is when you find the right person that shares your value, that you really like, that push you, that is passionate about that, just keep it very close to yourself in any way you can. Like, of course, good comp package, but like being part of a family, culture, all of that, I think that's the most important for me.
For what it's worth, Joëlle, when I was hiring for clinic, vibes, 100%, because I was living in clinic, 5 a.m. till close. Actually, someone who'll be on panel 2 was someone that I worked very closely with at that time, and I think it much like what you're saying, made all the difference. I'm conscious that there are lots of folks here with questions far better than mine, but one last sort of question before we transition. If you could go back to the beginning, day 0, if you can remember, Simon.
Yeah, I can.
If you could go back to day 0, if you could do one thing differently, what would that one thing be? Maybe we'll start with Andrea and then go down the line.
Scale the corporate team earlier. I think we waited too long. Like we we waited to buy 3-4 sites before actually starting, and then it ended up being all me and Enrico to actually manage 3 clinics and 4 clinics, etc. So yeah, I hired a team and then buy.
Because we were set up as a growth business from day one, we had investors, so we're very much set up like a private equity structure, or effectively a family office. So the one thing I would have changed was asking for twice as much cash for the growth journey, and told them it would take twice as long, because that's the reality. And that probably maybe more.
He wants to change his answer.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Joëlle, one thing.
I mean, mine is going to be so personal, but it's get a good builder. We had the worst builder in the entire world, and he was just awful. And it was just like, obviously, I went on vibes, like they really fucked me over there. But yeah, and also, you know, with everything, like as stupid as it sounds, like get contracts in place. Like in the beginning, we literally genuinely went on vibes with our contractor, and then we had a contract which was like, you know, in paper signed. It just like it wasn't actually like properly legal and stuff. It was just like the worst luck, but also just like the worst mistakes ever. So yeah, with me it was builder. So just invest in a good builder. Don't go for the cheapest quote and get everything on paper. So.
Thanks. We have a few minutes with this group of panelists. Happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
What was the mic coming? Just one for Simon. When you were growing pure sports medicine at the start, back in 2007, with was it 3 treatment beds and a curtain in between, and you had great clinicians, what was your first priority when hiring a non-clinical member of staff, bearing in mind that you knew that was probably going to take time for them to provide revenue for you? And what could you briefly go through the systems and process that you went to achieve that?
Well, bearing in mind a bit of context, so the business had been founded in 2002, saw its first patients in 2003, proof of concept for 3 years. So technically, I was their first big hire of a non-clinical individual. And I guess with that growth mindset, I was coming on board to double the size of the Kensington clinic. We were looking to take space in the square mile. We eventually found 5,500 square feet on Threadneedle Street near Bank. And so I guess, you know, it's very much investing ahead of the growth curve. You know, we were very growth focused, and it's difficult because you are taking quite considerable cost ahead of that growth being delivered. But it does focus the mind, particularly when you're reporting to your investors about what you're doing with that capital ahead of the growth that you've been talking about delivering. So I just think being very, and then again, if I sort of step away from my position and think about the other non-clinical key people that were hired in the early days, being very critical and analytical about what you are expecting them to do. Not just today, but tomorrow as well. And making sure that they are able to do that, not just today's job, but tomorrow's job. And yeah, I mean, again, time is money, so you want to deliver growth quickly and effectively. So yeah, I mean, everything in those days was very much time driven. So it was time, outcome, and the outcome was multifactorial. How quick to get a new clinic open? How much did it cost? Was it on budget? How was it growing? All those things that come into play. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other folks? Yes, Dave. Shout or wait.
Thank you. One for Simon again, I'm afraid, mate. 9 greenfield sites, brand, notoriety, infrastructure. Why acquire? Why not go to war?
Well, the acquisition was a strategic one. So effectively, it was a clinic based at the Roehampton Club. So you can't just walk in off the street and set up a clinic there. So it was an interesting acquisition because we not only had to agree terms with the seller, we had to basically get on side with the club. But to sort of step back from that experience and look at market opportunities and greenfield versus acquisition. The pros and cons, obviously greenfield, you can dictate the space to a degree, and you can dictate your team from day one, but you are standing still when you start, so you've got a bigger cash drag, and depending on where you're at, you might be able to sustain that. The benefits of acquisition, clearly you should be buying a profitable business, and you should be buying a business that you can add value to, either with your pricing or growth into the space. And so the benefit is that it's generating cash from day one, but you've got all the cultural challenges that we've talked about. So both have their place, and I think it is dependent on the opportunity.
Was there motivation behind that question, Dave? Are you going to war? Other questions? Yes.
Hi, another question for Simon, I'm afraid.
That's all right.
So when a clinic or any business for that matter starts scaling from being a startup, things start falling apart really quickly because what works in a startup may not essentially work in a scale-up. So for specifically in the context of clinics, what's the advice you would give to anyone who's deciding to move into that phase?
That's a very good question. I mean, I guess we've been lucky that we've learnt lessons over 19 years. But to sort of condense that all up, it comes down to two things. Having the right people, number one. So this is having people that can scale with you. So being very clear about what you want with your journey, and I think that goes back to skill set. If the individual that you've got is not right for the job, have the courage to make that change. And then secondly, I would say a lot of times it's the systems that fall apart. So think very carefully about, I mean, some people think of systems as a cost. For me, they're business critical tools. So when you think of it in that context and you're investing you should be looking at, if you really want to scale, enterprise level solutions that can give you that flexibility, that scalability, that resilience, but does cost money to deliver those solutions. So those are the two things, people and systems, yeah.
Maybe just before the next question, if I can just nudge. So I think it'd be interesting, without putting words in your mouth, Simon, it sounds like Pure Sports Med is sort of in machine mode right now. You have your playbook, you have your execution more or less, and now it's a question of speed. I think in the work that you're doing at Skingevity, both the approach that you're taking and also obviously at Injectuals, I think you're opening now site 3. It would be interesting to hear, I guess, maybe the same question, but at different stages of that journey, where you're sort of acquiring it, like in a growth uptick, and Joëlle, you're now going into this is greenfield site 3, with a good builder, very good builder, excellent builder. So maybe starting with Joëlle and then Andrea, sort of thinking about how are you, to Simon's point, like thinking about the systems that you want to take into site 4, site 5. I know you have ambitions to go to the US. Sorry, I don't know if it's private or not, but you have ambitions to go to the US. So you're starting to think about the infrastructure to do that growth. So how do you think about that? And then Andrea, similarly to you.
I wanted to ask as well, is systems, you mean like CRM and stuff?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, fine. Sorry, so how am I thinking about opening the third one and the fourth one? I mean, look, for me, it's indeed like I need to get operationally and like sort of like SOP wise, and like that's now, first in, sounds stupid, in the first 2 clinics, you don't really need that. You notice that as well. Like you can get away with like not having everything of that, like that perfect. But now it's like, it's becoming just too big of a beast now that we need proper protocols and not proper, SOPs, and like, operationally just everything needs to be set indeed, and everything just needs to be tightened, because otherwise it just becomes unmanageable, and that's like obviously something that we are now like actively dealing with, and that's also, I guess, what I see as the biggest bottleneck or like pitfall, that's like, if that's not, 100% or at least 99% structured and all in place, there's going to be issues, you know what I mean? So
I'm curious, Joëlle, because I know Injectual is quite a high volume clinic. You have a lot of throughput compared to most aesthetics clinics. when did you start to sort of feel, I don't know if it's number of patients, number of appointments, whatever the number is, when did you start to feel that sort of pinching of actually it can't all be in my head? What was that sort of roughly point in time?
A while ago. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously now that we're like serious about the third, that the third location is about to open, I think that's, to be honest, yeah, that's also just when, and also just like, I guess team changes and like, you know what I mean? You can't rely on just only one person. Like it just, there just need to be structures in place in order to like, rely on like one clinic manager, that if without that clinic manager, your entire business, crumbles. So yeah, like it's been a while obviously, and we obviously always make improvements and stuff. So I think it's now becoming very apparent that it's like essential to make or break, I guess, the business. You know what I mean?
And Andrea, I guess you're sort of in the middle of that journey by locations at least. How are you guys thinking about systems for growth?
Yeah, so, well, from a system perspective, we tend to standardize across location. So we have our CRM, our clinic management systems, and ultimately we have it all. So that's a non-negotiable in a deal. Like Xero, like all the financiers, all that is not really client-facing. It's our clinic management, so we standardize that. We are at that phase in which we're starting to build processes, policies, HR, etc. But everything that really is patient-focused, customer experience, pricing of the clinic, all that is the mandate of the clinic. How do we control that? We do have pretty good earn-out structure or bonuses on the lead clinician, manager, etc. that they're incentivized on whatever we want to do, which is growth.
Makes sense. Any other questions for this group of speakers? Yes, sir.
Hi there. Yeah, it's just for Andrea. I just wondered what your criteria was for buying practices.
So we have a list of, I think, 15, but in the first that we present to the board where we need to approve a deal. But the first one is, do we like the practitioner? Yes or no? How much do we like it? That's the key one. Then we have the usual stuff. So has to be certain size, has to be profitable. We prefer growing business that turnaround situations. And then, as I said before, we really value the culture that we see. So before making the deal, we really spend a lot of time with the practitioner. Before signing the deal, at the very end, we meet all the staff. We do a 30 minutes with each one of those. We get like the feeling on what they will do better, what they're struggling with, etc. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
So the first criteria is vibes.
And we offer the best.
And great. Any last questions just before we wrap up panel one? Nope. I'm getting a turn it off signal from the back. Great. Folks, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. They'll all be hanging out, so feel free to chat. Thank you so much, guys. We're just going to take a break. Take 15 minutes, snacks, drinks. Thank you so much for coming back, joining us. Too close? Not close enough. Be closer. Grab the mic. Speak like this. Is that all right? Too close now. Back here is better. So we'll just do a quick review of the responses, which for us, given the work that we do, are already terrifying just on the first slide. But we'll see what comes out. And some of these are, in quotes, easier to answer. Some of them are a bit trickier to answer. So we'll see how we go. So how many new inquiries did you get last month? The customer hat-wearing people in the room will call these leads, and everyone else will probably call them new inquiries. So it seems like 45% of us probably know this number right now, those who answered, so they can probably tell you that number. Another 45%, which is a very big number, have a sense, but it feels a bit more like art, not like science. And then 10% of us do not know. Maybe those are the 10% who don't run a clinic. That would be, I think, a best case outcome. But I think it is interesting because this is in many ways blood flow for the clinic. And not knowing that number is a bit scary, but it is often the case that happens. So, how many new inquiries did you get last month? We asked, oh, this is the number. Oh, we asked you to give us the number, exactly, right? So to prove that you knew. This is the range. So we've got some seeing 0 to 50 new inquiries, all the way up to 500 new inquiries. So that's a lot of new inquiries. I would argue that those numbers might even get into the thousands for some of the larger practices, 500 plus. Multi-site operators, we certainly see clinics that have well in excess of thousands per month. Of all appointments completed last month, how many were new versus returning patients? So this is an interesting one. So some know the answer to that question. That's cool. 28%, 65%. That's a lot of people. Don't know but feel like they can find out. I would ask you the question: how would you go about doing that? Which would be very interesting to know. And then a smaller number don't know how to find out the answer. Also concerning, but that's not a big number. What is actually that split? So how many don't? Excuse me. Of the new starters, I should just read the slide. This is the easy part. Of the new starters, how many don't have a next appointment? I don't know the answer. 25%, 55%. I don't know, but I can find out quickly. Excuse me. I know the answer. 25%. I don't know, but I can find out quite quickly. 55%. I don't know how to find the answer. 18%. That's probably scary. If the people that you just paid to go out and get may not have a next appointment and you can't figure that out, that's a little bit of a scary thing. But 18%, okay. How many cancellations last month still don't have a next appointment? This is usually what we see as you sort of go deeper into the patient journey. The knowledge of what's happening, it becomes harder and harder to see because patients move around like bowls of spaghetti, not like straight lines. So it can be a bit tricky. So only 13% know the answer. 66% feel like they can go find out quickly. Again, I would ask the question how exactly you would do that. And then 20% are not really sure and don't know how to find out. Again, that's probably concerning if you're trying to build efficiency in the practice. How many hours does your team spend per week following up with patients? No hours, 6.9%. Okay, less than 10 hours, 72%. For some of the higher volume practices, that I don't know, maybe that's a good number, maybe that's a bad number. It means either it's really efficient or you're not doing it. I guess it could go in either direction. 20 hours, 15%. Less than 50 hours, that's a full-time person, 3.54%. More than 50 hours, 2.45%. So people are hiring effectively a full-time employee or more in terms of hours per week just to do follow-up. That's a lot of following up. We'll see why that's the case in a few minutes. I don't know if those results are shocking or not. As of today, how many patients across your entire database don't have a next appointment that should? 13% know the answer. A lot of people, again, this is the lovely thing about middle responses. Everybody kind of knows, except when they have to put a number against it. And then about 20% don't know how to find out the answer. Again, this idea of a lot of our focus on patient leakage, not knowing the answer feels, again, a bit scary. What time of the day are patients most likely to reply to a recall message? This is a sort of trick question. And we get all kinds of answers. Early morning, mid-morning, early afternoon, mid-afternoon, early evening. No one thinks mid-afternoon. Everyone says, oh, they're at work. Turns out lunch break is a good time. Probably not a surprise. And late evening. This is a trick question because the answer will depend enormously. Someone's nodding, I knew it. They do. Of course it will depend. Are you reaching out on email? Are you reaching out on WhatsApp? Are you calling them? Is it the first day of the week? Is it after payday? Is it before payday? Is it rainy? Is it sunny? All of these things go into does a person actually answer? And so we see in the data that we see huge variation in some of these things. So I don't have an answer, unfortunately. There is no silver bullet, but it's interesting to think about. I think that is probably the end. So I'll jump back quickly. Press the wrong one. I spoke earlier about what we do. This is not the sales pitch part, but I am going to share a little bit about what we've learned, this idea of leak stoppers, if you will. You can steal these. We have seen lots and lots of data, and if you want to take them, use them, apply them in your business, great, feel free. We are very much of the belief that we like to give the knowledge away for free and then charge you for it when you want us to do it for you. So this is very much stuff that we see and do every day. So the first one is the data. And the data that we see is often a complete mess and may often be a mess inside of clinics as well. And so this is one of the examples that we love to give, and we see this in a lot of our lead handling work, inquiry handling work. We call it the Sarah or Sarah problem. And the Sarah or Sarah problem is very interesting because you might get, and this is from our production environment, so you might get 4,296 new inquiries. And maybe you closed booked, so how many people actually moved through to a first consultation? Let's say you booked 10%, making up the numbers. We often find that inside that audience is the Sarah without an H, who last came into your clinic when her name was Sarah with an H. And as it turns out, your systems don't talk to each other, and so when Sarah with an H comes in and Sarah without an H come in, you think they are two different people, but actually Sarah has been in before. We had this happen earlier with a clinic where we reached out to a patient based on their phone number, and it turns out there were 6 patients in that database with the same phone number. I don't know exactly how that happens, but it happens. And so why is that interesting? Why is it a problem? Because the marketing spend is going to the wrong people. The marketing spend is going to people who have already been in. And so why they are finding their way back into your clinic through the marketing spend doesn't really make much sense. You can probably get people back in a different way. That's one problem. The second thing that's really interesting is that what we call these sort of recall leads, these patients who have already been in, they're actually what we see 4 times more likely to actually convert. So in terms of who you should be engaging to come back to your clinic, unsurprisingly, people who have come in already are probably the right people to focus on, oftentimes, not always. And how much more likely are they to come back? It turns out that it's 4 times, at least from what we see. So the Sarah or Sarah problem is an interesting one. The second one is this idea of intruding, and you can hear from the accent, I was not raised in the UK. I'm American by birth and childhood. Many of our team, by coincidence, not choice, are also from the US, and we always talk about the sort of cultural differences and the extent of forwardness or lack of forwardness in different parts of the world. And certainly I think in the UK, as an outsider, but having lived here for 10 years, there is absolutely this sense from what we see of, we don't want to intrude on the patient. And that probably makes sense if you're sending Black Friday deals. That can be very forceful when it shows up. But we often find that that is not always the case. You should, as it turns out, intrude. Intrude is a very strong word, obviously. Don't intrude, so to speak, but show up. And I'll give you an example. This is a clinic that we work with in New York, so no one's data is being shared. What we found and what we think about is this idea of how do we compete for a patient's attention. And oftentimes their attention is consumed by Netflix, by Meta, by companies that are far better at keeping people's attention than any clinic is, because they have the resources, the know-how, the technology, the expertise. This is who you are competing with when patients start to drift off. It's Netflix, because that's what they're watching at 10 p.m. or at 6 p.m., etc. And so what we often find is that clinics will sort of do a little bit more, 10% more, to get back in touch with their patients. And it is just not enough. We always say it needs to be 10x, not 10%. You need to be 10x more proactive in engaging the patient. And there is always risk that somebody says, okay, like, enough. And what we find, it is very rare. Because if you're reaching out in the right way, with the right tone, at the right time, people perceive you to be offering and extending care and not necessarily pushing them to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. And so here's an example. May 18th, we sent a message to a patient based in New York. 18th of May, we sent an SMS. They were interested. They reached out to a clinic that we work with. We send this response. This response, as you can see, is labeled by Sonia. Sonia, for those who work with us in the room, is a very real person. She is sitting in the back of the room, all the way from South Africa. And so we reach out on the 18th at 3:15. We reach out on the 19th at 3:21. We reach out on the 21st at 3:26. We reach out on the 24th at 3:31. We reach out on the 28th at 3:36. Now you would think to yourself, this is really intrusive. And then we reach out on the 2nd of June at 3:41, and then suddenly something happened on the 2nd of June at 4:11. turns out this person is interested. Now why? Of course, the rational brain. Why on earth would this person need 8 different points of communication just to do this? I have absolutely no idea. But what we do know is that people need a lot of love to go from I'm thinking about something to okay, I'll engage with it seriously. And the thing that's crazy is that this particular, I was told to make it shorter, this particular point of conversation required 14 more outbound communications to move them through to a consultation. So altogether it was 20 points of correspondence to get someone who said, I'm interested, to actually show up. It's a huge volume, and suddenly when you start to think, well, it takes 20, sometimes it takes 25. We have clinics that we work with where it takes 121 days to move someone from inquiry to a booking. 121 days. When you start to think at that time scale and at this volume, you suddenly realize it's not a human problem. You cannot reasonably expect someone to be sending this volume of communication without sound, hey, just checking in on you, hey, just checking in on you. That will piss people off. When we launch a new clinic, we will sometimes pre-script, and Saskia, who's also in the room, will lose her mind doing it. We will pre-script 120 touch points per journey. And that is because it takes volume. So this is the other sort of thing that we learn. So if you're launching new marketing campaigns, you're launching new recall campaigns, write a lot of communication in advance and prepare for that to go out in real time, because it will take a lot to move people through the journey. The third one, and I had some conversations with folks earlier today, is that the front desk is not a sales desk. And this is a sort of final thing that we share. So we talked earlier about team. Hiring front desk is a very challenging thing. I lived that reality. Many of you have lived that reality. It is a very, very hard role to hire for. When you find someone who's great, it is like a drug. And you will do anything to keep that person. You will pay them more. You will buy them a dog. You will do anything to keep them there and keep them happy. But it's often not the case, especially as you grow and as you scale. And so what we often say is that front desk is not a sales desk. And the reality is that they're just two different people. One person is biased to administration, to service, to hospitality. They're very procedural. They are not waking up in the morning and at night thinking about conversion. And not to say that we should be selling in healthcare, because people shouldn't be sold to if they don't need support, but 20 touch points to move someone through to a booking is ultimately a sales process. We can call it whatever we want, but it is ultimately a sales process. It's a soft sell, it's a consultative sell. These are different animals. And if you think about in a business environment, if you're selling to other businesses, you don't go out and hire someone with 2 years of retail experience who you can train on a system and go be a salesperson. You hire people who have sales experience. And so this is a different animal altogether. We want to show you very quickly what bringing together data, technology, and engagement looks like. This is the sales part of the presentation. So we'll do this very quickly. And that's the end of the sales part of the presentation. It's quick. No, I think we're coming up cold on the internet piece. So we might jump to panel 2, absent the demo part. Is it live yet? Nope, this is not live yet. It's a good point. We might have the wrong. I don't think that's probably the case. We'll give this one shot, and if not, we'll move on. So if I could ask the second panel to come, there's a bit of a punchline after the demo, by the way, was we sell your clinic mold-free, leaks in the pipe. It was going to join up really nicely, and we've just totally ruined it. Panel 2, if I could ask you folks to come up, that would be, thank you, already coming. Yes, already coming, great, we have all of you know who you are. And so we have 3 folks joining us. They'll introduce themselves in a minute. Welcome, please do speak into the mics, because we didn't get almost any of the first panel. Everyone was way too relaxed to do that, so be very forward in your mics. Great, so I think the second panel is meant to be this idea of creating value. So we talked about operations, culture, some of the plumbing, some of the day-to-day. Maybe we can think more about the money moments in this panel for the sellers, the buyers, and the people who have sort of gone in and done some quite deep plumbing in thinking about finances. So just to get started, maybe I can ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we can get going. Maybe starting, if you don't mind, Enrico, and then going down the line.
I'm the co-founder, co-CEO of Skingevity. I was an investment banker for many years at Goldman Sachs, so buying, selling, and IPOing businesses. And we now have 5 locations and looking to acquire more.
I'm Stephanie, so consulting background, used to work at Bain and Company doing mostly private equity deals, and then also a mix of helping businesses understand their highest value customers so they could obviously go out and get them. Post that, worked with Jared for a very long time and joined a clinic as interim CFO and then moved up to CEO.
I'm Shaima. I'm a private GP, co-founder of Chelsea Medics, private GP clinic with 2 branches. Also work on the BMA Private Practice Committee Deputy Chair and the Independent Doctors Federation GP Chair.
Thank you. A lot of ground to cover. I think maybe just to start, Shaima, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. So you direct set up 2 GP sites. GP is a slightly different perspective than what we heard earlier. So I guess it would be interesting to start when you think about creating value at a clinic level. What does that look like in a GP context? Probably different than in other contexts. So from a GP perspective, how does value creation happen?
I think initially it's all about, obviously, patients. Very, very important. And it's also about, I think there's lots of things that I learned afterwards, I will say. We actually went into a joint partnership with a top American healthcare company in the UK last year. So it wasn't a typical acquisition, it was a joint venture, so we still hold equity but sold a large proportion of our practice. And they approached us, and we'd been running our clinic for 9 years and had been thinking about selling but weren't sure whether we were going to do it or not, whether we were going to expand. And when they approached us, we then started looking at, kind of that side of things. And in hindsight, if I look at it, I think the important things are definitely you've got to have the right number of patients, you've got to have the client base, whatever we want to call them, patients, clients, consumers, that's what people are looking for. You have to make sure you've got SOPs in place. You have to make sure that the people that you've employed are employees. So in general practice, things are different. You can actually have self-employed doctors who work with you, because a lot of doctors work both in the NHS and in the private sector. So, that's a very big factor as well. Probably those are the 3 most important things, I think, when you're looking at trying to, think about selling a practice. Yeah.
Maybe just building on that, so Steph, you've done a lot of financial transformation, if we can call it that. Fixing the books, not cooking the books, fixing the books in practice. And it sounds like, Shaima, you're saying, what I'm taking away from that is go early, start thinking early. Steph, what has been, I guess, your experience taking a clinic on that journey from maybe a bit too loose financially to a much tighter operating model?
I think it depends obviously on the clinic, but I think in terms of driving value, it's always either at the top line, so sales or costs. So assuming your fixed costs are you're quite a lean business and you want to rather focus on, the top line, it's probably looking at your customer lifetime value, which is basically made up of how long your customers stay, how much revenue they give you, and how much does it cost to acquire them. And obviously you may have great economics, like they give you a lot, they pay you £1,000, it only costs you 200 to serve them, but you're paying like £800 to buy the client, which obviously doesn't make sense. So it's definitely about looking at sort of the unit economics of your customer base. And yeah, like I said, it's a bit too much of a broad question, because I think it depends. Like some clinics maybe are actually spending too little and therefore will never get the growth they want. So yeah, I think depends on many things in a nutshell.
Enrico, on the buyer side, stitching together some of the things that I've talked earlier just now, unit economics, how deeply are you
looking into that level of performance in the clinic when you're thinking about buying?
We would love to look at the level of performance, but I think in reality a lot of the small businesses don't quite have the level of data. But I think the most important thing that has been said is the value isn't created at the point of sale. The value is created by all the folks that were on the first panel. We just try and crystallize that value and we try to understand it. So it's the things that we care about when we look at it is that we are buying a business. So don't make it dependent on you. If you're the sole practitioner, you don't have a team, I'm not buying a business, I'm buying you as a person, that's great, but it's a different value proposition. So in the lead up to that, I think that's the most important thing to focus on, really.
Got it. So you use the word lead up. How far back does that go?
Preparation should start 2-3 years before, really. Because when we look at it, if you want to have built a team, you don't build it quickly. It takes time. We look at how long have people stayed with that business. If it's a whole new team, that creates more risk for us. So I like to see that the team has been there for a while. And so you need to prepare that early. You need to diversify the concentration from the lead practitioner to the others. That takes time. You need to move the patients there. And then the other bit that's important is we don't buy businesses when the seller wants to exit immediately. So if I'm thinking about someone, I want them to stay at least 3 years with us. So if you want to be gone in 3-4 years, you need to start planning now for it. Otherwise it will be too late.
So a few clinic owners in the audience sort of go, 2 years, 3 years, 4, 5. I have to be 6 years from now. I have to be thinking about when I get out. It's a long time. Yeah,
Yep.
A long time. Shaima, does that match your journey?
I totally agree. I should have said that as well. I think one of the biggest things is, particularly if it's a doctor-led clinic, is if you've got this kind of lead practitioner and you're worried about them leaving and taking all their patients, and even no matter what kind of something that you sign that says that you're not allowed to work in the area, the restrictions and the covenants, I think you can't stop someone from working, and so it's one of the biggest things that when we went into this process that we had to prove that that our GP associates would be able to take over that, and our patients weren't totally dependent on us.
Drifting away.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. So in both of the practices, I guess, that you acquire, which are oftentimes backboned by a principal of some kind. They may not be doing all the appointments, but there's a principal. Shaima, obviously in your practice as well, they were sort of lead practitioners. Steph, in the clinic environments that you've been in, it's a bit more, I guess, therapist or consultant-led. Consultant used differently, but therapist-led. I think it'd be interesting to understand, how do you think about workforce in that context? Because you have a recruiting issue if someone leaves, but they're usually not holding 80% of the book. How do you think about sort of value and team that's in the treatment room in terms of creating that uplift in the clinic?
Yes, I think your performance is so correlated to how people feel, especially because clinics are normally quite small. So there's normally like 10 people sitting with each other every day. They talk to each other, they're friends with each other. So I think it's definitely creating an environment where they feel safe. So, job security, etc. And giving them opportunities to grow. It can sometimes be difficult because it's very limited in a single site setting. So obviously the bigger you are, the more opportunities there are for growth. For example, a senior consultant could become a manager somewhere, or move on to start another clinic. So I think that retention piece, and at the end of the day, it's human beings. I mean, we're more an aesthetics practice, so selling is very important. And obviously when morale's high, and if you motivate people properly with the right KPIs, they will sell and support you no matter what. But if you don't, that very quickly slips. And it's I think because the teams are so small, it really impacts the rest of the team. So I find it quite tricky in those small environments, but I think, just figuring out how to motivate people and what motivates them.
It's amazing to me that we've been here for 2.5 hours and we only just hit KPIs. That was going to be the first thing I was going to. So I guess, Enrico, to you, so the 3 lovely letters, KPIs, how do you think about performance around sale?
what are you looking for? To your point, you don't have great data in some of the smaller clinics, but what do you have? What are you working from? What are the key numbers for you?
Yeah, well, the first one we said earlier is not a number, it's the vibes. So that is actually criteria number one. Look, revenue and recurrency of that revenue, because it means you have good customers that keep coming back, so they're high quality. Growth rate, of course, we prefer a growing business. It means it's doing well. It's easier to keep on the momentum rather than turning the momentum. We do look at the concentration point that we said earlier. If a practitioner is doing 80-90% of the business, it's incredibly concentrated, it's incredibly risky, because if that practitioner gets bored after the sale or gets the flu, we have a problem because the sales are not coming through. So I think those are really the 3-4 key things that we look at.
Shaima, having been on the, I guess, being the queen practitioner, as it were, for at least the...
I wouldn't say that.
At least in the early days. You were, I guess, when you're starting out, you are the thing that Enrico just described eventually needs to sort of transition, this idea that it can't all be with a single person and their relationships, etc. How have you, I guess, enabled that transition in your practice? How have you sort of gone from founder, operator, patient-facing to slowly, gradually moving further away and creating more, I guess, distribution and equity in the other practitioners who are seeing patients? What does that journey look like for you? What should people be thinking about?
I think it's quite difficult in general practice because you're seeing patients, the same patients all the time, and what they like about general practice is that they know their GP. So it does make it quite difficult to do that. But what we did, because you build up your patient base. I've been doing private practice since 2006, right? And so you're going to have your patient base, and you're not going to tell them, oh, by the way, I've been acquired, you need to go and see another GP now. That's not going to happen. But what you are going to do is any new patients that come in are going to see your new GPs. And that's how we did it, and that's how we are doing it. So I'm a co-founding partner, so my other partner, both of us were the main, obviously, patient-based, earners as such for the clinic. But all our new patients, we don't see any new patients unless it's specifically requested by someone that we know. And what we focused on was branding the clinic and not us. So our clinic was not named after us. Nothing was branded in our names. And so people saw our clinic and hope still see our clinic as a clinic that's got good integrity and good medicine, and it's not because of myself and my partner. And that's what we started creating that probably about year 3-4.
Quite early on.
So
actually.
We did that quite early on. We knew at some stage there was going to be some sort of exit strategy, and so yeah, we went down that path.
Interesting. I think Shaima, you've been quasi-acquired-ish, aligned. There's a relationship now with another
Yes.
person
Yes.
or entity. And Enrico, you're acquiring now quite rapidly. There's obviously a lot of excitement, interest, the holidays. They all come into view when people start talking about exit. It's rarely that pretty after the transaction. What does post-sale look like for you? Things are signed, then what?
Very little changes. So we take our time in doing a deal, and during that time we discuss with the sellers their transition plan, and so we agree with them. And some of them want to stick around and do exactly as much as they were doing before. Some of them want to decrease over time, and we factor it in. So by the time the ink is dry, everyone knows exactly what the role will be. And I think in aesthetics, a lot of practitioners have other commitments. It's not many spend 6 days a week in the clinic anymore, and we respect that. I think that's one of the common fears. I think we're selling and it's going to become a 9-to-5 job and I need to clock in and clock out. We're very clear that's not what we need. The clinic was successful with them being there 2 days a week. That's great. Let's continue that. That's absolutely fine. So not much changes for them really. Over time they might want to go down, and we're very happy to accommodate that.
I think this idea of accommodation, is that like a real thing, or?
Yeah. Some of our practitioners have changed their days.
Okay.
Yeah, we've changed the days, we've allowed that, changed the hours, gone down, gone up. ultimately, with our model, the lead practitioner is still key to the business. And if they're not happy, the business is not going to work. Neither Andrea nor I are doctors. We don't come into the clinic and manage that relationship with the patients. So we need the lead practitioners to be happy. If a practitioner is spending 5 days a week in the clinic and suddenly says, the day I sell, I want to go down to 1, that clearly doesn't work. So we need to be reasonable. But within that, it's very real, and we've done that.
Can I ask, Steph, I have the luxury of knowing this because we work together. Part of your journey in clinic leadership was cutting things?
Reducing
Not
costs.
people open, but just cutting things. One can say making things more lean. You talked a little bit about revenue. That's usually where people like to spend time and attention. You did a lot of work on the other side of the house.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in the context of creating value, where do you look? Where do you go looking for things that maybe don't belong there, that can be leaned out, that can be made more efficient? Do you have a sort of, here are my top 3 things if I'm going into a new clinic that I'd cut first? You're not a surgeon, so.
It also depends. Sorry, I'm going to say this again. I think you'd hope that, by the time you want to sort of start to get to think about exiting, you've got a very good view of your numbers, because, like you've said yourself, most PE businesses, etc., will only buy profitable companies. So they don't want to go and inject more money unless you're maybe on the borderline and they really think it's a growth story. So I think it's having a lean mindset early on and maintaining that. It can hold you back. Like I know your team mentioned that you didn't set up your corporate team fast enough, for example. So I think it's a fine balance, because you can also overspend in the beginning, and then you're kind of stuck in that cycle. It's much harder to cut spend later than increase spend. So I think it also, cutting spend takes a massive toll on like the team, the company. It's like it's not a fun job, I would say. So I think I prefer the much leaner model, prove something, then sort of speed up. But I think so many practices are so different. You could be spending more on marketing. You could be spending too much on your overheads, your rent. Some things are harder to fix, for example, your lease agreements. So, yeah, it very much depends, unfortunately. Again.
It's not helpful at all. I think, Enrico, something you said earlier is helping to crystallize.
Yep.
Which I imagine there's some form of storytelling in that exercise.
Yep.
How do you think about storytelling in the context of transacting? How do you, at some point, think about your own storytelling? What does that look like?
So there's 2 things that impact value. Uncertainty, so I want as little risk as possible, and friction. If you make it hard work for me, I become uncomfortable, I take time, I spend time, get less excited. So I think those are the 2 things. Then you can weave the narrative about it, but make it as riskless as possible. So know your numbers, as you were saying. Have your CRM clean. That's a key problem in aesthetics. And if you have any skeletons, just tell me up front, because at the beginning I can work around it. I have a board. If I go back to my board 3 times for new skeletons, they get nervous. If you tell me up front, we can work around it during the business plan phase. And then the other part is friction. And here I can't stress enough the importance of good advisors. Wrong advisors take time, cost money, and we get less excited by the day. So you want to keep the value, you want to move quickly and frictionless. So those are the 2 things that I would say focus on. The last bit in that is the clinic needs to keep working. So if during the deal the revenue starts dropping, that's a problem. We need to justify it to the board. So again, the good advisors mean they can do the deal, you can focus on your clinic. That's important, that's key.
Shaima, you have lived through this on the operator side. Enrico's talking about it on the buy side. To the extent that you are comfortable to share the sort of highs and lows, what were the what was the roller coaster like for you? What were the things that totally caught you off guard? What were the things that made it really easy? If you can sort of take us into the experience of selling, or whatever it is that you did with said organization.
The
just
ease
help
of selling. I'm not sure that's even a sentence.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's nothing easy about it. I think everyone knows that. It's the biggest headache ever. I think if anyone says otherwise, they're lying. I think particularly if you're medicine-based and you've been to medical school and not done an ounce of business before, and you've just, you built your clinic, but this actually took me to a different level, I will say. But the process itself is very arduous. I think we were very fortunate that we had very, very good record keeping. I mean, we kept everything to it. We had spreadsheets for spreadsheets, so it did make it very, very easy for us in that respect, particularly with the due diligence and putting all those things in that data room and the never ending. So that was probably the biggest kind of headache. Then you think it's all over, and then you go through the negotiations, which they throw something at you when you think you're just about to close, and so it's a constant, and what I think you almost need to double the time that you think it's going to take, I would say, but afterwards, when it was all done, I had a bit of a holiday. I think there are advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, look, when you've had your own company, you've been able to make decisions and just make them and do things. When you're working with another company, which is a much larger organisation, you are having to. It takes a bit longer to do the things that you want to do, which I think would be expected.
Very diplomatic.
Yeah.
Very diplomatic.
But it's true. I mean, that's how it works, right, in big corps, and that's how, and you would expect that, and it's not what we didn't, we would not expected that. I think the biggest thing is that it's taken away the headache of HR and admin, which has been amazing, and that's probably our biggest headache running your own business, and having that taken away, I'd pay them for that. It's a huge relief, because you're already doing it. I was working full time, seeing patients and looking after them, and you're dealing with that stress, and then running a business and doing HR and doing accounting. I mean, obviously you had your accountants and all that, but you were still doing all those things, and it's all taken away. And I wouldn't go back. From that perspective.
You're terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said HR and admin. Could I ask you just to be a little bit more? Admin feels like what are the things inside of admin?
When I say HR and admin, I mean kind of a lot of all the HR they've taken away, so we don't have to deal with anything. Any complaints among staff, nothing. We don't have to do anything like that anymore. Payroll, everything from that perspective. Admin perspective, in the way that we send out newsletters, we do, there's all these other things that we do, and they do that all for us. So they help us monitor all the kind of accounts and numbers and things that we need to, from even from a marketing perspective of patients. So it's good. It's good. I'm enjoying it. But it's been only a year. Ask me next year.
We'll ask you next year, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the idea of admin. I imagine, Steph, you would have seen a lot of admin, given your role. Enrico, I imagine that, at least from what Andrea was saying earlier, a huge amount of your job has become admin.
Yep.
Which must be wonderful for you.
Love it.
So, can you maybe tell us a little bit about, without going so deep that we all want to kill ourselves, into the admin, help us understand why is admin in healthcare, because in healthcare in particular, it is remarkably painful in a way that running a coffee shop is just not that painful. So on the admin, the non-clinical, why is it so hard? What have you done to try and make it easier? Because your job is effectively to compress all of that admin. How do you keep it in its box rather than let it become all-consuming, as it often is for clinic leaders?
So we have hired in a central team by function. So we've said, what are the biggest headaches? HR. We have a very good HR person, finance, and marketing. Because those are the typical headaches that every clinic has, and so we said we can take it away. We can do it better. We can keep the clinicians happy. They can focus on managing the patients and on the culture of the clinic rather than having to deal with it. So we built the team around it, which is Andrea's point. We wish we'd done it even earlier because it does take time to find the right people. It does take time. They've all been into the clinics. Everyone knows them. They know everyone. So they're really integrated. And that takes time because if you have 3 clinics and 50 people, they need to go and meet 50 people while doing their job. So that's how we've done it. We built a team of professionals.
Steph, you didn't have that luxury. You were that team of professionals?
Well, I think delegating a lot, which actually is good because it makes people feel like owners. So there's obviously different segments. In healthcare, you have to be, like you said, your record keeping, your consent forms. It's not value driving, but it dramatically de-risks. And doing that kind of stuff wrong can be, I wouldn't say business ending, but you could obviously have a lot of claims, etc. So I think there's fundamental things that have to be done and have to be done properly, even though they don't create that much value for you. So I think delegating those just to someone reliable. And then there's the more value-driving things, which I would say are things like marketing. HR can be also very value-driving, where you maybe need more innovative thinkers that can, it's just a different kind of person. But knowing your team and what they're capable of, because you may also have a team that's not capable of that, and it's ultimately going to set them up for failure as well as your business. So I think it's, you have to balance the two and also know when you need help externally, pretty much.
I want to pause there just for a minute to see if there are questions. If not, I have one more, but I'm conscious of time and want to give folks the option to lay into these good people, if you so wish. So are there any questions that jump off the page? If not, we can crack on. Yes, please.
A question for you, Enrico. You've acquired 5 businesses. How do you go about valuing the purchase price of those?
Classic answer is we look at EBITDA. The answer is actually a bit more nuanced than that. So before we do an offer, we need to sit together, understand the business, understand where's the trajectory, the concentration that we discussed earlier on revenue and all that. So the ultimate metric is a multiple on EBITDA, where the declination is what does that multiple look like? And that depends on the things we said. So a larger business and more diversified commands a bit of a higher multiple, a growing business commands a bit of a higher multiple, and based on all of that and the fit and the conversation, that's how we do it.
Again, in regards to valuing a company, the numbers are pretty straightforward. You have EBITDA, revenue, it's all basically applicable to all clinics or businesses. The waters get really murky when we start talking about intangible assets. So would you say that intangible assets essentially play a role in terms of the valuation only in the storytelling aspect? Like how would I as a buyer, or rather I would as a seller, prepare my clinic and use those intangible assets to raise that valuation and negotiate a better price for my clinic?
It's a bit of a banker answer, but the value of those intangibles is reflected in the performance of the clinic. So if you have a strong brand, you'll have a large clinic, so large revenue, and it declines down to large EBITDA. You'll be more profitable because you can have better pricing, and so it's all reflected ultimately in EBITDA. Again, we look a little bit at, we can tweak that multiple, but ultimately, if you have a strong brand, it means you're big, and that's already reflected in the valuation through the financials.
I think that's code for it.
No.
Shows up in the numbers.
So Shaima, this is for you. If you could redo your admin, what would you prepare, like 3 years in advance, to make the sale more palatable now or later? What, as a clinic and as a healthcare clinic, medical clinic?
Yeah, I think I would have prepared in advance. You're right. I mean, I think everything. I think you need to make sure that everything, all of your SOPs are in order. You need to make sure that all of your HR records are in order. You need to make sure. I mean, finance is anyway. The accountant's always there, and you've got the bookkeepers who are doing that side of things. I think you look more at how you would look at yourself, and so actually maybe more looking at kind of what your growth is expected to be. We didn't do that. We didn't give our own growth. We just did it and saw what happened and went, oh yeah, wow, we've grown this much. But it wasn't kind of, we didn't project ourselves. We didn't say we need to hit this KPI. We only added KPIs much later on in our kind of clinic. And I think I think our mistake was that we didn't get a BD person in at the beginning, and we just thought, oh yeah, we were typical doctors, ran a clinic, we were doing well, we were happy, we were growing, which was great, and that's all we thought about. But I wish that we had actually got someone in earlier to do a whole BD thing from maybe year 2, you know, because I think we would have probably, well, we definitely would have grown much more, and I think understood more when we actually came to do that. So I think my biggest thing would be investing in someone early to help with that side of things, and just making sure everything's in order and in everything, admin-wise, HR records, everything needs to be in order, because they go through the last 5 years in quite detail. So you need to make sure it's all there.
Any other questions? Well, then just last one for me, and maybe we can go down the line. So I will ask the same question I asked the first panel, which is, what one thing would you do differently if you could go back to the beginning? The beginning will be different for each of you, I suppose, but what is the one thing, I guess you sort of just said get everything in order, but maybe give us the one thing of the everything, and then we can come this way. What is the one thing that you would do differently in the beginning?
Business development. I would have got a business development person in earlier.
The business of a clinic, you might say.
Yes. That you would help with.
Steph.
Maybe make more bolder decisions. I think you can get quite like stuck in your routine and, oh, if I change pricing like this, it's going to like disrupt my whole business. But, you know, often that's not the case. So I think maybe being not drastic, but trying to pull levers a bit without being so fearful of what the result would be, probably.
Build the team earlier, same as Andrea said. Ultimately, that's
Makes
what
sense.
we're
You work together, so
yeah.
that's.
It's also what we're asking of the clinic. We're telling clinics you need to have a team. We should probably be doing the same thing.
Makes sense. Folks, thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions, for sharing. Just before we wrap up, you can sit here if you'd like, or if you don't want to be in display, you can, whatever you prefer, as you wish. You're welcome to stay in any seat you'd like. Just before we wrap up, so I think we very intentionally brought together people who probably wouldn't end up in a room together. Some of you might. We have a strange amount of concentration in MSK for some reason, but there is definitely a blend. And we also wanted to invite and open doors to folks who are doing other things in the space. We're very excited that the tech is ready, per Simon earlier, or at least we think the tech is increasingly ready, and so we're very pro-tech as a tech business. But there are also other people who are sort of enabling the ecosystem. I'll recognize a few that are here tonight. So Joshua with Varillo, who's helping people sort of do some of this transacting, which is very exciting, also has brought some absolutely gorgeous water bottles and fortune cookies. And fortune cookie for those selling, good fortune, of course. So thank you for contributing and for helping to pull this together. We have the EFRA team as well. For those who do anything in insured billing and want to jump out the window, you should instead go speak to the EFRA folks who are doing some really exciting things in the space. So I think anything that we can do to try and foster community around clinical and commercial working together is very much what we believe in and want to do. Also, I just noticed actually the HMGG folks in the back as well. Go talk about, oh, hey, Michael as well, that's great. For marketing needs, who are excellent. So I think where we can bring people together, we obviously will try to. We apparently do a podcast now, which is news to me. But please do feel free to listen. We try to bring people on to speak. Some of the people who are in this room have already come on to speak, mainly about surfacing perspectives. Earlier today, Dale joined to share what was a really amazing journey through terminal diagnosis to cancer-free in the course of a year. So we try to just bring together different perspectives. To the extent that you want to contribute, you are very welcome to. We would love to extend our conversation to your conversation. To the extent that you want to listen, we would obviously invite you to do that. To the extent that you have feedback for us, we would also very much welcome the feedback. So thank you very much for joining us. I think that's where we end. We will hang out. Feel free to spend some time. There is dessert. And there's a demo. Right on time, guys. Really excellent. So I think for those who are hanging out, maybe we'll get a dessert, take a dessert, please do. For those who need to leave, because I know there are some people who need to leave at 9, please do leave. Maybe in like 15 minutes, we'll come back if you want to stick around. We'll show you what the AI looks like in how it's like the AI, and we'll show you a little bit what it looks like because we have one Sonia and a team of patient coordinators. They support hundreds of thousands of patients. Which is a very hard thing to get your head around when you think at that kind of scale. So we'll show what that actually looks like in real time if it works. And it works, that's great. So thank you so much for coming. Please have dessert, and if you want to hang out in 9:15 or so, we'll do a quick sort of show and tell, and then send you off with water bottles and good fortune, courtesy of Rotsaert. So folks, I'll just take 2 minutes. This was supposed to stitch up really neatly with the conversation earlier, and we missed the moment. So if you're still here, I assume it's because you want to see the highlights reel. The interesting thing that we find about AI in healthcare is that it, unlike software, is often invisible. In that you can't really see things happening. And so what we've tried to do is create a sort of show reel, if you will, which helps us to visualize what is happening under the hood. And I think the important thing to say is that we, much like everyone else here, have seen a lot of AI stuff, some of which is great, some of which is more concerning. And the thing that we're really interested in and the problem that we're trying to solve, and this is not to encourage mass unemployment, but how do you actually take people out of the equation? And what we found is that AI alone does not get you there yet, at least, because there is always an edge case in healthcare. Oftentimes the edge case is the case, and as soon as you have these issues, somebody needs to be there, and as soon as somebody needs to be there, you have to keep them, even if they're only there for those fringe issues. And so what we have done, which many days we wake up and regret this decision and then go back the other way and feel like it was a great decision, is we're actually trying to build all the way through AI and human together. And it's an interesting challenge because how do you make people and tech actually work together rather than bolting things on here and there? So we'll just show really quickly some different patients. For the practitioners in the room, this will look very familiar. So patient number 1, as an example, this is the patient. And said patient sends a message, "Hi, I had to cancel last time, can I get back in soon?" Now, you imagine the normal flow of this kind of interaction. A patient writes in, someone may need to be there right away to handle it. If they're not, they probably have to wait. Maybe there is an AI agent there and they can do the initial correspondence handling. The nice thing about a question like this is that it's pretty friendly. It's not scary. There's nothing in here that makes people say, oh no, the bad things are coming. And so what we do is we throw our lovely elephant at the problem, and the elephant helps us say, hey, this is actually not scary. And just figuring out that it's not scary is very hard, as it turns out, because some things may be scary, especially in healthcare, that actually are in fact not scary, and vice versa. So this is the first step that we focus on. The second one is this idea of data. So how do we take this patient and verify them against the clinic? The clinic has a practice management software. That practice management software, going back to the Sarah versus Sarah problem, may look funny. So we try to figure out if this person asking a question is real. Oftentimes, particularly in new inquiries, we find that it's just spam. So your marketing funnel is full of spam, as it turns out. And so we look at the patient, we retrieve their history of appointments. We say, oh, this person came in these times, they canceled an appointment, they came in for a consultation, they had initial inquiry, whatever it might be. We check, really importantly, this clinic knowledge base. So we document extensively the SOPs of the clinic. What do you charge? When do you charge? What's your cancellation policy? Which of your practitioners is most likely to convert an initial assessment? All of this data is informing what comes next. So we check this knowledge base. We say, hey, we found a cancellation policy. Now we know how to handle this question. It's approved because it's within this rescheduling window, and it's not scary, so we're going to check and confirm that availability, and we're going to send this thing on its way. It's going to be friendly, it's going to be consistent, it's going to be professional. Those are the brand archetypes for the clinic, and then we're going to get this nice message that says, hey, you're very welcome to reschedule. All of this will happen without a human. The human will then have a little look around and most likely will just say, away you go. We will then throw some more verification at that, because if it's Sarah and not Sarah, and it's actually the wrong Sarah, not the right Sarah, there's all of this checking that needs to happen. So we do lots of checking, and then we're ready to go, and off it goes. But it goes with a human patient coordinator sitting there looking at it and saying, yeah, that looks fine. And because it's low risk, the checking that they need to do is actually very, very low. And so you can move through a massive amount of volume, because oftentimes this administrative work is administrative, it's not complex. Yay. Our patient coordinators do that. They throw up confetti and they say, yay. Patient 2, they write in, here's Charlotte, she writes in with a question. We've used Sonia, because oftentimes they will be speaking to Sonia. They say, I'm interested in a consultation, but I'm not sure which treatment I need. Do you have the price for your shockwave therapy? And so here we are looking at this message. We're saying, there's nothing scary here, but there's some uncertainty. The patient is not entirely clear on what they want. They probably need some support, some consultation, some nurture. They might want to speak to somebody, not to a robot. And so this is a message that comes through, and we say, oh, hold on a minute, it's not green here, it's actually a different color. So again, we need to do some thinking, and we say, hey, there's moderate complexity here. There's nothing that's jumping off the page that we need to be very scared about, but we need to think about and qualify this response differently than, can I just move this appointment from A to B? And so the same thing happens. Hey, in this case, it's not a new patient. There's no match found. And so we check the clinic knowledge base. We see that there are these different consultation types, shockwave therapy pricing, et cetera. So we pull this information. We check the practice management software. We pull all this information together. All of this is happening automatically. So the patient coordinator is not going anywhere to find anything. It's just happening in the background. And again, we get this nice message. And it says, hey, something's going on here. Thanks for reaching out. I'd love to help you. This is our pricing. And this will then be escalated into a patient coordinator flow. So the human is now going to be responsible for handling this patient rather than just approving, because the human in this case says, hold on, we need to do more here. It's not just a send a message and away it goes. Human reviews by Sonia. Oftentimes it is Sonia, other patient coordinators as well. And then away we go. And this is where it gets interesting, and this is often where we find this promise of AI falls a little bit short at the edges, because in healthcare you get things like Daniel, and in this case Daniel says, hi, I woke up this morning with very itchy skin. Is this normal? Now this may happen one out of 100, but that 1 out of 100 means you have to put someone there to handle it, because it's not yet ready to do it on its own. The risk of getting it wrong is too high. And so again, we do some thinking. We say, hold on a minute, this is very, very high risk. We're detecting in this communication there are problems, and we need to address this in a different way. So the AI falls away, not relevant anymore. This is purely immediately escalated to a patient coordinator. Patient coordinator again steps in. Sonia is again in the flow and steps in and says, human patient coordinator is now handling this. The context is ready, so Sonia again is not having to go check, why is this saying this, what was their appointment history. We pull up the information about Daniel, we pull up the information about the clinic, we pull up the information about the appointment history, we pull up their previous activity, we do a lot of pulling up, and then we show the escalation reason. Hold on, patient reports new symptom, itchy skin, and requires some kind of clinical assessment, which we don't do, and this immediately goes back to the clinic. So we will not ever put AI in the firing line of something clinical, because we just don't think it's ready. We could be wrong, but we just don't think it's ready. And so the human resolves the problem, and away it goes. Sonia sends a message. And so for us, we have found in this, and we're now doing tens of thousands of interactions a week, maybe more, in the USA, in Canada, in the UK. What we find is that this is a data and governance problem. And so when we see clinics that want to throw AI receptionists in the mix, we get very scared because we want to know, like, how are you governing the data? How deep are you on the SOPs? Do you really understand what the clinic would say? Are you governing it? What happens when it goes wrong? And these are questions that oftentimes we've found that clinics will sort of pay the price for after they've made an implementation decision, and it gets very scary. To give you a sense of scale, so in our very early days, we had one patient coordinator supporting about 10,000 patients. Right now, we have a team of patient coordinators supporting well in excess of 100,000 patients. And we don't really see those two things scaling linearly because we're able to not get rid of the humanity and the empathy, but get rid of the mess. And the mess is what slows things down, and it's why you need to have 3 people on the desk instead of 2 people on the desk or 1 person on the desk, because all of that gets lost in this sort of messy middle of checking 3 systems, moving patients across this spreadsheet to that spreadsheet, and then messaging your friend, hold on, did this patient come back in, and then get the WhatsApp back, oh yeah, let's do it. All of that is what eats up the time. So this was supposed to, as I said, fit very neatly into stopping the leaky journey for the patient, but this is what we're doing. Obviously, we're very happy to chat more about it for those who are interested, and thank you to those who are already working with us for entrusting us to partner with you on the journey. Hopefully we don't royally mess it up, but so far we've been okay. You might tell us otherwise, but it's been really fun, and we really enjoy working closely with the practices. So again, thank you for staying extra to have the dessert and to see the show reel. And if you're interested, obviously, in learning more, this is the sales pitch part. You should go talk to Saskia, who is standing at the back. You should obviously come chat to us. Anyone on the team, we'd love to share more about it. Thank you so much, guys. That's the end of it, so have a great night. Thank you.